Storm in a Teacup. Hey guys, Culture here. Today I'm sharing with you a tale from my childhood, a beautifully innocent glimpse into my early days when I was young, dumb, and full of love. Love, I said. Back then, things were so much simpler. When I liked someone, it was just a crush. I didn't have the crippling anxiety of whether they liked me back, because my mind couldn't even conceive of my own pride. I just showed my affection with reckless abandon. Yes, simpler times. But also stupider times. Like really stupid. Like dumb as a doornail levels of idiocy that make me cringe with embarrassment when I reflect on them. Maybe in the moment I didn't know how silly it all was, but now I have the curse of experience. So here's just one little glimpse into that blush-inducing period in my life. I call this story Storm in a Teacup. I was in primary school, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and was invited by one of my friends on his family's trip away. They were headed to Warrnambool, a town just at the end of the Great Ocean Road, with not much to see or do, admittedly. But my little baby brain didn't know that. I was just looking forward to a trip with my friends. Plus, there was one big attraction for us, the Fun for Kids Festival, but we'll come back to that later. We wound our way down the painfully long highway to Warrnambool, trying to stave off brain-aching boredom with classic road trip games. I wouldn't say we weren't allowed to play electronic games, but it was heavily implied that quality time would be ruined by us all burying our noses in our Game Boys. That didn't stop us talking about games though. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Beyblades. Yeah, in retrospect, it's clear that morning cartoons had a huge impact on our interests. And then there was our current favorite game, Cell Damage. Cell Damage, in case you haven't heard of it, was one of those demolition derby type games where you drive around an arena and crash into each other with ridiculous weapons to cause maximum destruction. Think Twisted Metal, but more cartoonish. Looking back, it probably wasn't the best game in the world, but we loved it nonetheless. This boyish delight for over-the-top violence bled into our real lives as well, often play fighting with each other not only for our own amusement, but quite often to impress girls as well. But of course, at any moment, this mucking around could escalate. Someone hits a little too hard, someone holds the other person's arms behind their back for a little too long, someone riles the other person up a bit too much, and then boom. Fists start flying, tears start streaming. It's honestly just a matter of time. And as we made our way up to Warrnambool, you can trust that there was plenty of pushing and shoving and teasing. A storm was brewing. We got to Warrnambool, where we stayed at a holiday park. You know, one of those community living style setups, where some people park a caravan, whilst others rent out a small motel looking room. And you walk past weird old people in the morning in their dressing gowns, and they smile and wave at you with their bony fingers while sipping tea through their thin lips. So you avoid their gaze and hurry over to the toilets thinking, as if I didn't already need to pee badly enough. No? Has no one else had that experience? Well, in any case, it was a cozy setup. All the kids were in one tiny room with bunk beds. I remember I had a cold all weekend, and the first night I was curled up, struggling to sleep because I couldn't breathe. And I'd also just downed a giant mug of hot chocolate, so my stomach was playing a gurgling bolero that I just couldn't shut up for the life of me. It was one of the worst nights of sleep I'd ever gotten. And maybe that played some role in my disposition the next day. We all trekked to the Fun for Kids Festival. Face painting, live music, petting zoo, variety acts. It was all sorts of stuff that I'm told some kids like, but I didn't want to do any of that. Luckily, there was one room that was my ideal hangout, a massive indoor playground. Maybe it wasn't that massive, but as a kid I felt like it was a castle of tunnels and slides, a multiplex of kid-safe entertainment. And to make it all even better, the entire perimeter of the hall was lined with arcade machines of every genre. Very nice. I don't know how I ever had this much energy, but we definitely played in that room all day. Tigi, hide and seek, and 40-40 took up practically all our time. If you don't know what 40-40 is, you didn't have a childhood, so my condolences, I guess. We were running around, laughing, everything was fine. And then I saw a super cute girl. Let's call her Teacup. She was sitting talking with her friends underneath the playground, and for some inexplicable reason, I just knew I liked her. I instantly had a crush on her. Now, I was way too shy to ever go up and say hi to her. You'd have to be crazy to even suggest that to me at the time. But quite frankly, I had a much better plan in mind. Be an idiot, so she had to notice me. And what better way to do that than to demonstrate my superiority at playground games in the most obnoxiously loud fashion possible. The underside of the playground was a series of padded support beams and a grid arrangement. Teacup and her friends were positioned directly in the middle, giving me the rest of the area as a kind of 360-degree display space for my juking maneuvers. Have you ever watched World Chase Tag? In my mind, I was going to give a demonstration of those kinds of skills with Teacup in the center of the arena. I would hide behind poles, feint one way then leap the other, slipping under the outstretched arm of my pursuer, pulling myself around another pole to gain momentum and slipping by once more. It was so glorious. In my mind, that is. See, although that was my goal, I didn't quite have the proficiency to pull it off. I wasn't exactly the most athletic kid. I know. What a surprise. I wasn't bad by any means, but compared to my friends, I was but a middling tag rookie to their heavyweight tag champion godliness. I tried to dive, to duck, to dodge, but I wasn't good enough. They caught me almost without fail. It was an incredibly poor showing on my part. My exhibition of excellence had crumbled into a shaming of my subpar speed. At the time, I felt completely humiliated. Looking back, I realized that Teacup probably couldn't have cared less even if she had have noticed what was happening. But it wasn't Teacup's judgment that scarred me. It was the mocking of my friends. Let's call them Thunder and Lightning. Thunder had noticed I was interested in Teacup. He was doing his darndest to make sure he'd tag me every time, and then really rub it in, trying to stir me up, get a reaction out of me, get my hackles up. And I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I felt that hot flush of shame spread over me, the anger flooding through me, my blood boiling. My fists had balled up in rebellion instinctively. Rather than a sudden lash of fury, it was a slowly climbing tension, a gathering sadness transforming into a tumult and then threatening to emerge as wrath. It only got worse as we moved on to bumper cars later on. Purely out of coincidence, Teacup was there as well. If I couldn't prove my worth with Tiggy skills, then my driving would have to do the job. That penchant for Cell Damage's extremes of brutality fully expressed itself as Thunder, Lightning, and I smashed each other into the walls, much to the disapproval of the poor teenager hired to run the track. Lightning got yelled at more than once, eventually getting barred from the course. But I was angrier at Thunder, who seemed to have developed a vehicular vendetta against me. He was constantly cutting me off, blocking me. Teacup still hadn't noticed me, and now Thunder was gasping for air. He was laughing so hard. I was a powder keg ready to explode. All I needed was the ignition, and it came later in the day as Teacup moved into the food court area. I decided I was also hungry, so I said we should go get something to eat. My friends responded to the suggestion with a tandem eye roll, and surprisingly went along with my farce. Thunder's mum had packed lunches, but I eagerly said I wanted to get donuts with my own money. Any excuse to get to the food court since I couldn't leave without supervision. I saw Teacup eating ice cream. I had to find some way to get her attention. I was desperate. I would never be this desperate nowadays, or rather I would, but I'd attempt to restrain myself. Kid me, on the other hand, was another beast entirely. He would do anything short of actually talking to a girl to get their attention. It was a sad desperation that was practically inescapable, an eager nervousness that overcame my whole being. If I didn't find some way to vent it, I felt like I would rupture. All of these built-up emotions manifested themselves when, while I was gawking at Teacup in a subtle but really not so subtle way, Thunder came up and smacked my donut out of my hand. It was a hot jam donut too, so the red deliciousness inside seeped out onto the floor as the sticky, sugary outside clung to every trace of dirt. My precious donut was ruined, but more importantly, Thunder had made me look the fool once again. But this time, I wasn't taking it. I was set off. Thunder and Lightning were laughing their butts off, so I immediately knocked Thunder's drink out of his hand. He did not like this at all. There was no point in having a discussion with him about the merits of giving someone a taste of their own medicine. It was on. Thunder shoved me, hard, square in the chest. I lost my balance a bit, but held my ground because I was ready for it. I shoved back, pushing Thunder against the donut stall. Thunder shot me a look of pure disbelief. Lightning had stopped laughing, and instead stared slack-jawed in amazement at what was happening. See, I was a pretty calm kid most of the time. I barely ever got physical, so when I did, it meant I was really peed off. It wasn't laughable, it was seriously worrying, and Lightning knew it. Thunder knew it too, but Thunder didn't care because no one pushes him like that. Thunder tackled me to the ground. Luckily it was AstroTurf, but that only meant the fight could go on. In my mind, we were trading punches and holds like expert fighters, but in reality it was most likely a slapping, flailing mess of red-faced kids. We had certainly started to draw a crowd though, as kids pointed and yelled while concerned parents tried to keep them away. Thunder's dad was soon on us, pulling us apart. I looked back to where Teacup was, and she was laughing with her friends. Well, I guess I'd finally gotten her attention at least. Thunder and I were practically dragged away from the food court, still hot with anger and embarrassment. Looking back now, I'm fairly certain that Thunder was jealous. It definitely seems like the most valid explanation, ties it all together well. But then again, he might genuinely have just been annoyed at me for not paying enough attention. It's not jealousy so much as it is annoyance at the lack of consideration. I go on a trip with him and don't play with him without making it about my own agenda. Is it maybe too sensitive? Yeah, but I get it. And besides, it would be different if I was actually trying to approach Teacup, but instead I was just doing this weird passive attention grab. It was bad of me, but I was a kid. I didn't know any better. And Thunder and I, we were fine afterwards. Kids are resilient like that. We didn't hold a grudge. Each of these little situations certainly builds character, teaches you a little something. It gives you a different feeling or a new perspective that later on, when you're on the receiving end of it, you realize how the other person felt. And when it happens enough times, you finally learn the best way to handle it. How to be respectful to the other person, but also to yourself. I suppose in the end, this story was less about Teacup and more about Thunder. See you all soon. If you enjoy what we do here at Culture Crash, please consider supporting the show via our Patreon, where we have a bunch of awesome rewards, or by checking out our online store. All links are in the description below.